If you found this video enjoyable, please leave a like and hell, even subscribe if you want to. It only takes 2 clicks, and push that notification bell just to get the messages for my videos. That would be greatly appreciated. So I think some prior context is needed with the beginning of this video. So a while back, I made a video on the villains on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and gave my thoughts and opinions on all of them. And when I got around to talking about Toru, I was pretty negative because I was just off the heels of part 8 and I just was not feeling him at all. But after reading the comment section, which I should never do again ever, come to find out a lot of people actually genuinely like his character, which I found very odd. Being active on Twitter and other YouTube comment sections, I found that, you know, a lot of people just disliked him until that video apparently. And after reading the comment section a bit and just kind of thinking about it to myself, maybe I should reread the ending of JoJolion once again and maybe think about Toru a bit more and try to focus on him a lot. And surprisingly enough, I did run a community poll on my community tab, and surprisingly, a lot of people actually don't get Toru. So I think this is a perfect video to explain him and give a more proper opinion-based thing after rereading the ending of JoJolion. So the intro to the Wonder Review arc is incredibly interesting and super subtle. Toru enters the scene trying to help out Yasuho, while subtly trying to activate Wonder Review at the same time. Their conversation kind of boils down to, hey, we dated, you're pretty cool, maybe we should try that sometime again. Classical conditioning at its finest. That will eventually loop back at the very end of the arc. Shortly afterwards, a interaction between Josuke and Toru occur where, you know, Josuke's kind of, you know, suspicious of Toru. And shortly after that, Wonder Review shenanigans start to occur. And I'll shortly explain a Wonder Review, but for right now, let's focus on Toru. Toru's introduction is extremely subtle and is kind of laying down the foundations of the Wonder Review chase while getting Toru's kind of base character set up for future interactions, which I genuinely like on a second and third reread. But on a first read, I kind of get why a lot of people get confused on why Toru is introduced like this, but after you kind of get it, you're like, oh, that's why it's good. You can also kind of tell that Toru is also kind of being built up to be a rock human, seeing how he's manipulating Yasuho and how in previous chapters we kind of gotten explanations on what rock humans are, and more or less that Toru by the end of the arc is kind of the peak definition of a rock human, a manipulator and being kind of evil personified. The next time I think we get some major dialogue with Toru is with Yasuho yet again, where we get more subtle indications that he is a rock human, where he kind of explains to Yasuho that he's tried to gain wealth in this world, lands of power where he can be on top. Of course, he has failed with smaller ideas, except for, of course, the Lokakuka and Rokkakuka. But right after this, we get some pretty key dialogue that I think kind of almost highlights Toru's character greatly, that I think a lot of people skip over, where he talks about anxiety and anger and how both kind of chase each other in this infinite loop of, hey, I'm anxious, and that leads to anger, and then that leads to anxiety, and so on and so forth. Depending on your interpretation and context of this dialogue, you could say the anxiety and anger part could be the relationship between Toru and Yasuho. But in my opinion, I think it more reflects Toru's situation in life as a rock human. In the pursuit of power and wealth in the rock human kind of culture and idea, one's life would be very anxious and angry. Toru is in a place of power which he could lose at any moment, so he has to keep this kind of almost pushing of the other rock humans to get things done. And if anybody were to find out, it could possibly spell disaster, which of course does happen, so that explains the anxiety and anger part of this kind of mini monologue here. And I'm gonna be honest, first time reading this and even a second time reading this, I kind of almost forgot about this. This is some pretty key dialogue that almost gets thrown away due to the fact that Toru just randomly brings up wireless charging, and I think everybody took it as a joke when this chapter first came out, which genuinely and honestly sucks. I think Araki kind of almost nailed it here, but he just brought it up in such a weird way that people just kind of nonchalantly just went heh and just kind of moved on. And then right after that, we get the reveal of the head doctor's face thanks to Toru trying to manipulate Yasuho into chasing Wonder Review again, and then we just get introduced to Josuke's arc, which just wildly ramps up the ending incredibly fast. And then this dialogue just kind of gets missed, and in the midst of everything else, sadly. Then we get the ending Toru phase, where Toru is finally kind of showing that he is the villain per se against Josuke, who is of course our hero. There is some like super deep dialogue here that I think a lot of people forget, and how like Josuke is explaining how, you know, he is a person that does not care about his past or his future and is only current about his present, and how he's talking to his mom about this, who is unconscious / dead. It's kind of not explained very well here. I hope the anime does it a little bit better. And on the flip side of that, we get Joben, a character who is not caring about the future kind of, and not caring about the present, and more or less is almost kind of suffering because of the past a bit, and proceeds to do some pretty grievous actions in these later chapters because of said past and wanting a future. And then we get Toru, who turns out to be the rock human definition exemplified. We get the backstory of Toru kind of. It's more or less kind of a backstory for all rock humans, but this is mainly focused on Toru. And this backstory explains that rock humans are, you know, assholes. They're not humans. They have a give and take relationship between themselves. They start life at a very brutal point, being small little pebbles that eventually take over a hornet's nest and try to live in it, eventually growing up and looking for lands of power and wealth to call their own, being interested in groups and societies and having a negative idea because of it, which then eventually leads into God and nature, which surprisingly enough gets called back into Wonder Review. Surprisingly enough, this backstory eventually sets up Toru's ideas and how he just kind of wants the power and wealth that comes with the Rokakaka, and just kind of striving on forward and reaching this kind of plateau where he cannot be challenged. Ironically enough, he eventually does get challenged by Josuke, who surprisingly enough is the total opposite to Toru. The rest of Toru's dialogue at the very end of JoJolen is very kind of, hey, if I sell the Rokakaka, I'll get a lot of money out of it and power, more or less, with a bit of calamity ideas thrown into there as well, which I will talk about when we get to Wonder Review. The last few actions of Toru before he dies are extremely greedy and self-centered. To be honest, he doesn't care about any of the other rock humans and only cares about the wealth and power that he will get if he gets the Rokakaka back from Yasuho, who uses his past with Yasuho to manipulate her into almost getting it, but eventually does not succeed because of Kato, a person from Joben's past affecting the current, present, and future of Toru. Oh, look at that, we've gone full circle. And the last critical dialogue we get with Toru is phenomenal, and we really get a full picture of Toru now because of it. The dialogue states there is a rock atop other rocks with dreams and memories, and how he's witnessed a lot of things around him, but because of his death, that rock will not be known for those dreams and memories anymore, kind of losing them to the nature of everything around him, and eventually questions Kato, and we get her ideals and stuff. But more or less, Toru just kind of straight up reveals here that he is the rock atop other rocks, and if he dies and no one is around him because he is on top of the other rocks, everything's gone. He is anxious and angry and scared that, you know, if something happens to him, it's all gone. Everything he's worked for is poof, gone. It's eliminated from this world, and that is his fear. A very extremely common human emotion, which is a product of wanting wealth and power, because everything that you built up could be instantly taken away in an instant by a competitor. You can take that as an economic ideal, or, which eventually leads back into Wonder Review, a natural way of passing on, which yet again we have come full circle with the nature of rock humans in JoJolion, being a part of nature and the human world, being the total negative opposite to the human positive opposite, which can be seen with Josuke as being a person in the present rather than a rock human like Toru who is worried about the future. Now, when entering Wonder Review and its abilities and powers, things can get complicated pretty fast, but slowly building up into things. Let's talk about the song reference and the smaller things that build Wonder Review up. Of course, the song The Wonder Review by Elvis Presley is the song reference to Wonder Review. Now, the song itself is kind of almost very literal in its sense. The wonder of you. The song is, of course, Elvis Presley wondering about a woman. That's about it. It's really not that deep. It's from the 60s. The King of Rock was very, very simplistic. I'll be real with you. Of course, this idea translates back to Wonder Review. If you think about Wonder Review or the pursuit of Wonder Review, there is going to be calamity that will ensue. A very simple idea that goes back to part 3, where the more basic the power, the stronger it is. and in this case, being so simple, it is ridiculously overpowered. Now, of course, Wonder Review's design is based off of René Magritte's art, which usually predicts a man in a bowler cap with no face. When Araki takes inspiration from other artists and other art forms, he usually does things with it that you wouldn't really expect. And in this case, I think it's the fear of the unknown. Now, if you're a psychologist kind of guy, you'll kind of understand this. Humans have two types of fears, three maybe, it depends on how you interpret things, is that humans have two fears, the fear of the known and the fear of the unknown. And I hope those two concepts are really easy to understand here, because the fear of the known is, hey, if I put my hand on fire, I'll get burned, so I'm not going to put my hand on fire. That's pretty self-obvious. The fear of the unknown is when there's something in the shadows and you don't know what is in there. It's a very basic human idea that stems back to basically our prehistoric past, that is most likely a survival instinct that many scientists agree upon. The fear of the unknown connects back to the mannequin conspiracy theory, which is a long topic that I'm not going to go into. Basically, things that look human but aren't human scare people, and the bowler hat guy kind of look that Wonder Review has, which is inspired by René Magritte's art, kind of almost influences this idea. The mannequin-like properties of the bowler hat guy kind of almost give the sense of fear, and I kind of do explain it more in my Most Terrifying Stands Wonder Review video, so if you want to look up more on the stuff, just go to that video. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because, well, Araki is a man of horror. My man likes horror things, horror art, and the ideas and kind of the background for many horror-like things. So stuff like the conspiracy theory on the mannequins and the fear of the unknown kind of almost culminate into Wonder Review, unironically. Maybe Araki didn't mean to reference it, but it's almost kind of there, and I do want to point it out. And just remember, that's my interpretation of Wonder Review, just clarifying that, just FYI. But getting down to the idea of Wonder Review is a completely different subject. The influences, minor or major, are good and cool, and that's whatever, but the idea of Wonder Review is much more deep than I think a lot of people tend to give it credit. Toru explains, even if a person who is on the right path, who walks a saint-like life, will meet calamity eventually. It's unavoidable. It's actually kind of almost mathematical and philosophical in a way, depending on your interpretation. Calamity will affect anyone at some point in their life, no matter what, minor or major. You will meet hurdles in life. It's guaranteed. Hell, you can even say some people even watching this video might be going through a hard time. It happens to everybody, but of course in JoJo, it's used as a power system and is used for the villain, and it is grossly, magnified, but you kind of get the idea. While pursuing Wonder Review, events will happen. Things will knock into you, causing heavy amounts of damage. Anything from raindrops to chairs and walls could easily kill you thanks to Wonder Review. And in the most dramatic of cases, where you are literally seeing Toru, which is an instant death sentence, random objects will fall from the sky, potentially killing you. Even Mamazuku states anything that is under heaven on earth can be used against you thanks to calamity, the flow of calamity, the power of Wonder Review, which then leads into this idea of things under heaven. Of course, Toru is a nature-based character with things calling back to, of course, nature itself, like human nature and rock human nature, but actual nature and how God made this world, at least in JoJo. The flow of calamity is a literal energy in JoJo, meaning that God did create it, if a godlike being does exist in JoJo. It's kind of obscure and kind of like almost misconstrued in a way, but who honestly knows? It was the narrator speaking, and it's up to personal interpretation almost in a way, leaving it open-ended. But later dialogue states that even after Toru's death, the Wonder Review energy, the flow of calamity, is still in the area and is affecting people, very similar to the tsunamis in Japan. Araki was inspired by the calamity that the 2011 tsunamis did back to Japan when JoJo Lane started publication. A event like this, of course, is going to, do some damage to people, and of course Araki used this damage as a writing tool and used to make a character that reflects this kind of almost bad event in a way, and making it kind of, fun and enjoyable to read. And seeing Araki's interview questions on dilemmas and calamity, you must kind of get the sense of, well, Araki is scared of it. Araki straight up states that Calamity is so powerful it's only bound by logic of this universe, and of course that kind of connects back to the whole idea of godhood within the Rock Human backstory, connecting back to Toru, making this whole thing go full circle. It almost makes you kind of wonder, is Calamity connected back into the fate of Gravity and the entire idea that Part 6 had? Hell, even the whole franchise, if you really want to look at it. To be honest, I think Wonderview is a lot more deeper than a lot of people think, and hell, I think it even is more deep, but due to a lack of, author interviews and other things and such, I don't want to make too big of an assumption on the kind of the philosophical idea of Wonderview and Calamity and fate, and kind of almost a really deep subject to get into. All you have to know at the end of the day is because Toru is a very anxious and angry person, the flow of Calamity is almost a perfect weapon to use to secure your empire of fruits, if you really want to look at it like that. After analyzing Toru in this kind of sense, I've genuinely come to appreciate his character a lot more. Nature, the flow of Calamity, him, the ideas of human greed and ideas of the future, present and past in JoJolion is very, very good, and I honestly, I've realized my mistakes here. I do like Toru a lot now, but he's not my favorite. Of course, Funny Valentine, Pucci, and Kira are still up there, but I genuinely appreciate Toru a lot more now because of this video. Well, that's going to be the end of the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen.